So good morning and welcome. My name is Teresa Campbell, and you have joined the PIM and PIA Mid-America Financial Executives Council presentation. The topic today is unlocking strategic insights from our printing industry performance reports. Now note that all of our attendees are placed in mute mode to ensure a quality recording, which will be provided to all members in the coming days. However, we encourage you to comment and ask questions during the program by typing them into the Q&A field or the chat field at the bottom of your screen, and we'll ask them at the most appropriate time. So if we know that Dr. Ralph has a slide on it and we're going to get to it, you may see us hold that until a little bit later. But if it's relevant to that slide, we're going to go ahead and interject to comment on it at that time. Now, our Financial Executives Council is coordinated by leaders in both the North Central and South Central regions of the U.S. They guide our programs and content that are offered 6 times per year, every other month, and they focus on financial reporting and compliance, data management and security, and financial policies and planning. Our council co-chairs are Carl Nathy with Myers Printing, Ryan Wagner with Action Mailing and Printing, Matt Wills with LB Carlson, and Ken Rain with Daily Printing, who will introduce our presenter. Ken?
Thank you, Teresa. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ralph Williams. He has over 25 years of leadership experience in the printing industry. As president of 3 different businesses, he had ownership in 2 of those. In 2009, he entered the academia world as a management lecturer. He's earned his doctorate in business administration from Kennesaw State in 2015. And he is currently a professor at Middle Tennessee State University. He teaches strategy, entrepreneurial financial management, and management principles. And he also works with regional printing associations to conduct and provide industry studies, one of which that we're going to discuss today. He's authored over 50 industry articles, and he just knows his stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ralph. And one quick thing before I do, please participate and throw up questions if some of the stuff that Dr. Ralph is presenting piques your interest. Let's expand on it further. So without further ado, Dr. Ralph, go get him.
Yeah, knows my stuff. Well, I'm around people who know their stuff, and I share it and put it out there. How's that? So today, I'm proud to be connected with the. Can you see my arrows when I'm showing it like that?
Yes, we can see your.
Okay.
See your.
Great to work with Printing Industry Midwest and Printing Industry Association Mid-America. PIA Mid-America. I'm engaged with about 14 different associations. I'll tell you, these 2 associations are doing great things. And I get their emails, their e-newsletters, and their journals and that sort of thing. Doing great stuff. So it's great to work with them. Always great to work with this Financial Executives Council. Great thinkers. In fact, they'll join in today and talk as we work through, and then as Teresa said, chime in with your questions. What we're looking at materials, kind of highlights from our March 2025 printing industry performance and insight study. And what we're trying to do is look at highlights and then discuss again. The panel will chime in and you'll come in with your points, and we're trying to just gain some strategic highlights from that material. So what we'll do is review some of our key findings, and we'll discuss implications. And there's 6 different topics that we'll discuss. One is revenue and data trends. We'll look at cost and ask some questions about that. We'll talk about number of employees per firm. We'll talk about reviewing the estimating processes, the effects of other mergers and acquisitions, how those are happening around you and how they affect you, and then AI use and how that's related to EBITDA and in industry, the EBITDA percentage, and then also revenue growth. So again, this is a discussion. Chime in with any of your um, your thoughts with the chat panel, and also the panel will chime in at any time. Interrupt me anytime. That's not a problem. So our first topic is revenue trends and EBITDA trends. This graph shows where we asked for the revenue for two different years for a firm, 2021, 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. This is kind of the mess of the COVID. That's kind of in the past, all kinds of up and down that we saw. What we saw in our study in March of this year, where we asked for 2023 and 2024, was an average, I think it was around 100 companies, an average of 4.2% revenue gain from 23 to 24. So does 45% reflect the normal average revenue growth in association member printing firms? Is that the thoughts, and I'd like to hear the panel to chime in. Is this a decent benchmark, you think? We're seeing some growth among firms, 4 to 5% on average.
So I think that, from an association perspective, it's an average. We certainly see some members who are double-digit profitable, and we see some that are struggling to be profitable. So it certainly reflects that average of not profitable to double digits.
Well, this is not profitable. This is revenue growth.
Oh, revenue growth. Right.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Ken says we generally target revenue growth of 5 to 10% per year.
Any other thoughts?
Any other comments from the group or the panelists?
Yeah, I think that 4 to 5 seems like a reasonable target. And now if you actually achieve it or not is one thing, but I think that's a fairly reasonable growth target from one year to the next.
If that's a normal growth, what's a big message for companies in our industry? I think the big message is grow. Grow. Seek growth. It's possible. It's possible. It's doable. So I think that's a big takeaway from this. That, yes, it's doable. Go do it. And then if your firm is not continually growing, you need to see the possibility of growth and the importance of it. Wrap your arms around that as a team. Yes, growth, growth, growth. This is, we look at different strategic groups. You can see a bunch here. This is general commercial with a high amount of wide format, general commercial printing, labels, commercial with high amount of direct mail, general commercial with web printing, general commercial and labels, and then general commercial with a high amount of non-traditional products, such as developing marketing tools and other things. And this is the average revenue growth for each one of those segments with the number of firms. What do you see that's interesting in these numbers? What strikes you?
Ryan says, for those who have a part of their business coming from direct mail and or printing for direct mail, how are the UPS charges affecting growth and changes?
That's a good point. Is that affecting that 3.8% growth? Yes, yes. And from what printing companies I talk with, it's a growing challenge. It's a growing challenge. But one printing company that I connected with through LinkedIn, he said, we often forget that the UPS is delivering a package from New York to California for 75 cents. That wasn't interesting. Ryan, you had something to say?
I think Ryan contributed in the chat, but we also have Kevin contributing that says last year they had a pretty strong year, but they would say that growth came from companies leaving the market. So that's an interesting aspect.
Wow.
And that 2025 is proving to be more challenging. Customers are pulling back on the amount of runs to offset for the postage increases.
Yes, yes, it's a potential challenge. Uh, Teresa, you had some good comments about that wide growth, the growth in wide format yesterday.
Certainly, our discussion was about what happened with the sign industry in the past 5 to 7 years, where technology improved greatly. And so the equipment can do so much more with ease of use. Passing and doing all colors in one pass versus what used to be a mom and pop sign shop where they were cutting out vinyl letters and rubbing them onto coroplast boards. It really gave the commercial print industry an opportunity to step into that segment. They had the capital, the floor space, the IT support to be able to implement that. And you saw those mom and pop sign shops selling and decreasing, and commercial print really getting into the wide format market.
The other thing, and we talked about this before it started, Teresa you helped me with the phrase one-stop shop. This may help grow the printing segment by building a relationship with customers by adding something. Now, we talked yesterday a little bit about the potential of the challenges in retail stores. You're seeing so many empty buildings now, less signage in retail. That might affect this growth going forward. Moving on.
Yes.
Okay. Now I just smiled when we were doing this. The two top growing areas geographically, North Central and South Central. Does that make everybody smile? That's good. Would this, let me ask you this, would this affect, looking at this, could this affect your merger acquisition decisions? If you look at maybe the Northeast and the West is not as growing as fast. We see some challenges there in our studies.
Well, and Dr. Ralph, there's been some conversations about shipping or the cost of shipping and the industry being more into wide format, and that those big flat pieces are expensive to ship. And so we often have buyers looking to produce in the middle of the country because it's less expensive than to get it to one coast or the other because they're in the central part of the country.
Good point. Good point. This is the EBITDA percentage, and Matt made a good point. We were talking about this yesterday. This is not growth in EBITDA. This is the actual EBITDA, a percentage of revenue for different strategic groups. We're very diversified industry, and so we look at these different groups a lot of times. So what you see is interesting in these numbers. And panel, chime in and speak if you want to.
I think for me, I'm just surprised to see that wide format is again leading the way with the highest EBITDA percentage, and it had the largest growth year over year from a revenue standpoint. To me, I think of wide format, I think of like the retail signage and display type stuff, which retail's been struggling for quite a while now. So it surprised me that area is kind of the strongest.
Yes. Now we'll see if this continues, if it is consistent. So we don't know. And it's but it was kind of reinforced in some other things that we saw. Any other surprising things or interesting things?
Wide format typically tends to be lower quantities, larger pieces, but smaller quantities. versus cut sheet or roll fed, which tend to be a lot higher quantities. And so that's interesting to see that at the top.
It is interesting. The label companies did not grow as fast. They tend to grow in line with GDP. However, solid among 10 label printing companies, solid EBITDA. The general format with high amount of wide format and general commercial with a high amount of wide format, and general commercial with a high amount of non-traditional, both one-stop shops, building those relationships. Same thing with commercial and labels. So that's there's some benefit there. One area we're looking, and I talked to Teresa a little bit earlier about this, we're looking at what are effective ways to make those decisions, what areas to diversify in as a printing company. The average EBITDA, when you look at all the companies, was 12.2% of revenue. That's very consistent with previous studies. What's the big message for printing companies from that average of 12.2%?
Well, it gives you a benchmark to shoot for. If you're not getting there, you got to figure out why not, and then what are you going to make an adjustment to your business to get to that point?
Yes, yes, yes. If you're not, why not? And look at the health, yes, and your strategic thinkings. It should prompt you. Uh, okay, moving on. This is not a high-level strategic analysis. What I did was just looked at EBITDA as a percentage of revenue, and then percentage revenue changed between 23 and 24, and there was a positive trend line between growth and profitability, and a positive relationship between growth and EBITDA. Does that make sense? Why is that? I mean, it seems like a very obvious thing, but why would you see a positive trend between EBITDA, higher EBITDA, and higher revenue growth? Why is it? Why we see that relationship? I think it's, scaling. You're getting more out of your fixed costs. I used that phrase yesterday when we talked about this, and that's important. Also, if you're growing, you reduce the risk of losing other customers. So I see there's some positive, and I think it's a positive cultural thing too, if you're growing and you have a growth strategy in place. Moving on. Positive relationship between EBITDA and growth. So we encourage printing company firms to determine a strategy and a tactic for growth, set goals, communicate those plans and objectives for the team. This is a big thing that in studies I've looked at and some other things. You have a basket of potential prospects. Continually develop a basket, add to that basket of potential prospects. Have someone who's assigned that duty, finding prospects. A great printing company leader, when talking about this, he said, you need to decide, are you farming or are you hunting? Are you just growing organically, or are you hunting continuously for new prospects? That's important. And having a plan, not that it just happens every once in a while, but a continuous plan for seeking new prospects and then pursuing those prospects is very important. There are growing companies in our industry. It's important to join that group. Any comments from the panel?
Dr. Ralph, we call it fill in the funnel.
Mm.
And because you figure you're going to need to build that because every year we call the loss our churn in our business. So we know that we're going to go down on our current customers. So how are we going to fill that funnel, so to speak? So it is through prospecting. And when we're not meeting our goals, that means we're not meeting our prospecting. So it is tough. It is tough. And, post COVID, a lot of it's hard for our younger group to get into the mindset to go out and visit people, make that personal relationship. And there's barriers, like if you're trying to email someone, it's hard to get in, but if you can show up and say, can I meet with these people, gives you a chance. So you got to build these prospects, and it's tough.
Yes, in the first company I ran, I used this phrase. I said the circle is always contracting. So you've got to continue to expand the number of customers so that if anything contracts, we can offset that. It's so important. But again, a plan. Who's in charge and who is assigned to prospect, find new contacts? How often do they report to you what they found? And who pursues from there? Have a plan, a system for it. It's very important. Very important. I'm worried about Teresa. She's agreeing with me.
I mean, your comment about the hunter and the gatherers and making sure that our hunters are those that are comfortable with being uncomfortable, that we're not just bringing in prospects or leads, but that we're qualifying those leads, because some of them, if we really pursue them heavily, could produce so much more than just any possible lead.
I had consulted for that company about 15 years ago, and I won't share his name, of course, when I say this. In those years, he was not a good leader and not a good strategic thinker. And he has developed so well, so well. And I'm so proud of him. It's wonderful. You can develop these abilities. Oh, it's just wonderful to see what I've seen in him. We also ask, what's your revenue outlook from a subjective kind of way, and what's your profitability outlook for 2025? And we had 1 to scale, 5 scales. One was very pessimistic. I'm pointing with my finger instead of my slide here. Very pessimistic. 3 was neutral, and 5 was very optimistic. We had 106 respondents, and the averages were around 3.5 for the profitability and the revenue outlook and the profitability outlook. I'd like to ask the group, are you it was something we talked about yesterday. This was done in February and March of this year. I know we're only in July, but things have changed a little bit. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about your 2025 revenue and or profitability?
I think in general, I would say yes. You always have individual accounts or reps that are struggling or blowing the doors off. But all in all, on a larger scale, stepping back, I'd say yes. I think we're optimistic that we'll have or be able to achieve growth through either new accounts or growth within existing accounts. In general, I think that's where we stand.
We have one comment that they feel more pessimistic. And I want to mention, Dr. Ralph, that sometimes what's happening in society continues to impact that. And so when there's instability with our government or with our postal service or what have you, not knowing creates more pessimistic outlooks. So increases with the postal service and changes in their leadership and not uncertain about where they're going now with that 10-year plan, as well as, just the constant unknowing of what's happening with tariffs and how that could impact our industry a great deal. Sometimes they feel like if they just have a know of what to expect, they could be more optimistic. Ryan says they have clients that still seem very unsure due to many factors. including some of those we discussed, but others seem optimistic.
Yes, and you got to manage that. And I really related with that this morning during my devotion time. Sometimes you have to back up and just have peace with the things you can't control, and do things and not let it weigh you down. Not let it weigh you down. So we then ask, why are you optimistic or why are you pessimistic? So we had optimistics. They were involved in mergers, acquisitions. It was interesting. 60 responses from those open-ended questions said they were engaged in cost cutting and increased pricing plans, and they were optimistic over that. 6 said that they had new equipment, and 9 said they had a plan for more growth. I think that's important. Related to the last discussion, 11 in concerns said we're concerned about the political and economic environment, and in 4 said that they were concerned about lowered customer demand or lost customers. Now, I did a little paper recently where I took Porter's 5 forces theory, and I looked at these 5 different segments and looked at the effect, and we have buyer bargaining power is a high effect, substitute products high effect, competitive rivalry high effect, and typically Porter says when we have 3 high effects in an industry, that makes it challenge to produce profits as a company. So our industry is considered challenged, but in that context, it's interesting that we see growth in our studies, we see strong EBITDA, and we see somewhat positive outlook averages. So I had this thought. Wasn't that cool? Printing company leaders, if your team's outlook is not positive, it might be time to step back. It's time to step back and say, why not? And what can we do? What can we change? What can we address? What can we prepare for? Even if we can't affect the tariff decisions and other things, what can we do to moderate that? Okay, the next segment is cost. We're going to look at different cost. And we ask, how much did the cost increase in each of the following categories during 24, and how much do you expect these costs to increase during 2025? And the scale was not at all, some, but manageable, or a lot. So here's a graph where we've asked that question over 4 different years, and you see a little bit of a downward trend in these areas. There's the paper anomaly from a couple of years ago. This is the average for all 11 categories. When you take all 11 of these categories and put the average for these 4 years, you see a little downward trend in cost effects, cost increases. Do you see it kind of indicates a softening of cost increases over recent years? Do you see that? Do you see that? And again, things may have changed since we took this survey in February and March.
So I'm going to ask our attendees to type in the chat or the Q&A field and ask our panelists to comment.
While they're doing it, let me ask another question. They can chime into both. In what areas are you seeing significant cost increases now?
I feel like in 2022, there was quite a bit of money in the market, so there was more ability for costs to be increased post-COVID, right? Now things are coming back down. We're seeing, lower costs in transportation, lower costs. Some paper costs are down, some plate costs are down. But we don't see as much of a decrease in payroll.
That's interesting. A great point, Ryan. So maybe there was accelerated demand during that time, and it prompted the ability to increase more cost, and maybe that softened a little bit. Have things changed since the February, March survey? We've got wages up and then freight cost up. And I saw a webinar the other day that said there's potential for more freight costs going up, more increases recently.
I think the change from the springtime when the survey was done, obviously the impacts of tariffs and what is happening or might still happen with tariffs, that's probably the biggest unknown factor that's going to impact people in the near term.
Kind of related, plates was a big concern. Printing plates was a big concern. Have you seen shortages in printing plates? Have you seen dramatic increases in prices in printing plates?
While the attendees are typing in the chat, we have had several members in our region move to all digital technology to avoid the potential increases in things like the cost of plates.
Wow.
Nope. Dr. Ralph, our plates have gone up. Not a ton, because the group we're buying from isn't going to be nailed by the tariffs as bad, but we're seeing it, other contacts we've had in the industry are saying, yeah, they could see up to a $3 per plate increase if these tariffs go through. And I think part of it is some of these companies see that coming and they're trying to, I hate to say it, but take advantage of the situation. And they may not be paying the tariffs, but it's an opportunity for them to raise their price.
Wow. Wow. The other question, we've talked about this a little bit, are you seeing the tariff effects at this point? From what I'm hearing, I hear kind of a kinda.
Some, yeah. Well, also with the paper, some grades of paper that were foreign based, you're not seeing. And, if the pulp's coming in from Canada, it's costing more to, make it. So yeah, we're seeing some of that, but for the most part, it hasn't really hit yet.
Related to all this, a point, if your firm has experienced or is facing significant increased cost for an item or service, you might get your team together as opposed to just reacting to it and say why, what's happening, and what other options are there. Having a critical thinking, a brainstorming about it. This is going on. What can we do? What should we do? What are options? And that sort of thing. Now, this is something we discussed. I don't know if this is feasible or not, but if you have increased cost in some areas, you might discuss this with other association members and ask if they're experiencing the same. Now, I know that some of your association members, your co-members are competitors, so I don't know if this is feasible or not. Does anybody have any thoughts about this? I don't know if it's completely effective, maybe, and if it's feasible to contact others and talk about. You could ponder that.
I would say it certainly is an option. Our industry is pretty good about, particularly in the Midwest, sharing information that really helps the whole industry to advance. And, I want to point out that Ken brings up a great point when he mentions pulp coming in from Canada. Raw materials generally are brought in from outside, and then we do have manufacturing that happens in the US. So both with paper and with plates, we have companies that manufacture in the US, but we don't really have the raw materials, no aluminum smelting plants that are withdrawing those resources from the ground. And so it will impact our industry long term.
It was interesting. I read an article about the lack of carbon production in the United States, and how we import so much, and then we came out with some tariffs the next day on that. It was interesting, and that will affect us. The next
There's a
thing we'll
comment
talk.
here, Dr. Ralph, that they do have friendly competitors that they talk to with about those things all of the time.
Great. Thank you, Brian, for sharing that. And that's something you might consider that. Take advantage of your association membership to discuss those things. Next, we'll talk about number of employees. And we looked at the number of employees per $1 million in revenue, and we looked at firm size, at different firm sizes. Here you can see different firm sizes. This is the graph from 2023, shows the 2023 and the 2025 number. So larger firms, you can see this kind of trends down, have less employees or use less employees per million in revenue. Why is that the case? Pretty easy answers. More specialization. You have more employees who are specialized in certain tasks. That sort of thing, Teresa?
Certainly economies of scale,
Yes.
doing more with less. And then some would say those larger companies may have more revenue to purchase technology that helps in that
Yes.
workflow.
Yes. Now, it appears that the number of employees per million in revenue is trending down. You see a dip there and a dip there and there. Why is that a possibility? Why might we see that?
I wonder if some of the larger firms don't have employees who have been with the company longer, so they're able to produce more just from their experience, along with technology, like Teresa said. But long term, you can, once you understand, have a better grasp, and you're not rehiring and retraining all the time.
That's a good point. Thank you, Ryan. Also, rehiring and retraining, pulling someone into a group of 4 versus having just a group of 1, that's potentially easier. That's a good point. But I think technology is helping us do more with fewer employees, produce more revenue, more efficiency in our industry. And I think the big message is seek to do more with less. Growth doesn't always require more employees. Focus on efficiency. Focus on efficiency. Now, this just came to mind. One thing we found in recent studies were that the higher performing companies tend to spend less on administrative cost than the lower performing companies. And I said that in a luncheon in Louisville a year or 2 ago, and this printing company leader, his eyes opened up. He said, we don't look at our office in the same way we do as our plant as far as efficiency. So maybe there's some economies of scale from the office too. That's a great term, Teresa. Okay, we also looked at, and just quickly, I talked to various printing company leaders. Ken, I think, was one. I think maybe Ryan too, about different topics in our last study, and we got a plethora of topics. One we picked up was to look at the number of temporary employees, and this is a graph between the EBITDA percentage as a percentage of revenue and the percentage of temporary employees that you use. You know, it's interesting that this trend line is flat. We don't seem to see a relationship between more temporary employees and higher EBITDA. It's flat. I've got a couple of questions, but I think I'll just talk about this. If y'all want to chime in, do that. You know, there's some positives with using temporary employees. We did this in our third company. When we would have a project that required a lot of packaging or loading, we worked with a firm that provided temporary employees, and we could bring those in. They would work for a few days and then they would step away. Or we would say, we're looking to hire a press helper or a bindery helper to train, and they would bring somebody in as a candidate and we would hire them later. It really worked pretty well. But there are negatives. You can demotivate the other employees that are working there if you don't see the motivation in those temporary employees. It's hard to transfer the company culture into temporary employees. We're seeing that. I teach a graduate class. I have taught a graduate class the last few years in management, in which the health industry is huge in Nashville. And some of those students talk about their use of nursing subcontractors, and how it's tough to convey the culture to those contractors, and so to those nursing subcontractors, if you will. There's potential, but you have to do it effectively. If you do it, you have to do it effectively. Any comments for any of that?
I would just add, Dr. Ralph, that while you're making this presentation, our wage and benefits survey is going on. We only have about 2.5 weeks left for that survey to be open. And so I want to encourage everybody online to participate in that. But there's a lot of research there that shows it's a major balance. We know that there is cost associated with benefits and full-time employees, but there is also lower cost once they're over that onboarding retention place, and it may become less expensive than temporary or a revolving door of employees.
This is a strategic alternative to consider. However, you've got to apply it effectively. You've got to apply it, not a reaction, not a reaction. Next, this is another topic that surfaced from printing company leaders looking at reviewing the estimating process. We ask, how frequently does your firm review and update its estimating processes and numbers? And number one was multiple times a year. Number two was annually, and three, not every year. Now, this was a mistake. I should have gone the other way. The lower number is more frequent. The lower number is more frequent. So this is a relationship between how frequently does your firm review and update its estimating processes and numbers and EBITDA. And again, this is an inverted scale. So this shows that there's a trend that indicates companies that review their estimating processes and numbers more often tend to produce higher EBITDA as a percentage of revenue. So why would you see a positive relationship between the frequency of reviewing your estimating processes and EBITDA? Why is that potential? Oh, it reminds me of a company that was involved in a merger. They were busy. They were working all they could, but they were not profitable. Over time, like you wouldn't believe, they had not looked at their estimating and their budgeted hour rates in 8 years. And that was the basis. Any thoughts? Why would we see a positive relationship between looking at those estimating processes and numbers and a positive EBITDA. Any thoughts?
I think it's easy to just get in the production mode and then not taking a look at your estimating and missing hidden costs, because we all do it. There's hidden costs that we miss, and if you're not reviewing it, it just continues and snowballs.
Well said, Ryan. What was the term you used? Get in a production. How did you phrase that?
Yeah. I think we get in production mode, just
Yes,
trying
production
to
mode.
get everything out as fast as we can.
Yes, and that's an issue in small business leadership. You get so involved in the day-to-day issues. It's important, I think, to have a system. We had a system. I looked at we would keep it in mind as things change during the year, like our staffing and those kind of things. We'd make adjustments as things happen. But the week between Christmas and New Year's, I locked into my office. We had less contacts with customers and things like that. I locked in my office and focused on budget and estimating and that sort of thing. We had a system. I think a system is important.
A couple of comments there, Dr. Ralph. From Ken, much of what Ryan also mentioned, that of course reviewing estimating frequency helps them tune into what their true costs are. And then of course, Bob says in the last few years, costs are up a lot. We learned a lot from the supply chain issues that were happening with paper in the last couple of years. And oftentimes the cost was going up so often or frequently that they really had to put specifics on their quotes that said, this is only good for as long as I can get that paper price, so that you can track your margins.
I love Ken's phrase, in tune with their true cost. There's harmony. Yes. And in Bob, that's a good point. You have to adjust as it happens to have the right margins. Now, there's some people that argue against using HBRs for pricing. I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a benchmark. We actually priced jobs sometimes lower than the HBR, than our budget hour rates, but it helped us build a relationship or scale. So it's a decision-making tool. Any other comments there? Okay, we also looked at the percentage of estimate wins, compared to EBITDA as a percentage of revenue. There's a positive relationship, duh. I mean, the more estimate wins, the higher the EBITDA. When this came up, talking with printing companies, this printing company out of Michigan, I think, asked about this. I realized we didn't measure this in the 3 companies I led. I think that was a mistake. 41 printing companies shared that their average percentage of estimate wins was around 60%. 41 responded, and their average response was around 60%. And talking to another printing company leader a couple of weeks ago, he called just out of the blue to talk about this. He's doing the same thing, but using it as a strategic tool. Yes, look at the percentage, but also in what groups are we winning? In what groups are we not winning? What can we do to improve that? Should we look for more prospects in the winning group? Use it as a strategic planning tool. Strategic planning tool. Any other comments or thoughts there? Okay. Next thing we'll look at is the effects of other mergers and acquisitions. And other is key because we're talking about mergers and acquisitions around you. We ask, share how closures, mergers, and acquisitions of other printing companies have affected your firm. We had 17 positive responses. One, locations had moved out. Actually see more business come out of that merger, as I don't believe some of the customers like working with a new company. We've acquired customers due to printing closers. Company is doing the purchasing does not have the best fit for that market. We've gained some valuable employees from some of those layoffs from mergers. Firms going out of business help free up business and force clients to shop. Fewer competitors mean healthier overall environment. It only takes one lowballer in a market to affect everyone. I've observed a pattern of lowballing when a company is in financial distress. We only had 8 negative responses. Growth by acquisition, they take on new technologies because they're bigger. One lost a customer who was acquired and became a competitor. And then some say the printing companies, they merge and they develop new capabilities. Again, we had 8 negative responses, 17 positive responses. I think a key takeaway from this is if there are mergers and acquisitions around you or closures, look strategically at the opportunities. Stop and do critical thinking. What are possibilities? Any comments there? We're seeing a lot of it in our industry. Teresa doesn't have her screen on, but she's nodding, I can tell.
Yeah, Dr. Ralph, we acquired a company back in November of last year, and it did jumpstart our sales and our cash flow. So it was a small acquisition, but it did add some nice benefits to our bottom line. So, look for them. They're out there.
That's, and I remember us talking about that a little bit, Ken. It sounded like a very good strategic fit. And that's something we may study about how to make those decisions in the future. But yes, do that. Look for possibilities to make mergers and acquisitions, that sort of thing. But also look for opportunities for those that happen around you. The last topic, we're looking at AI use and EBITDA as a percentage of revenue and revenue growth. So we said, to what extent is your firm currently using AI? A 1 was not at all, a 3 was some, or 4 was a lot. This next trend was a little surprising. We see in this trend, we've got AI use where the lower numbers is less, the higher numbers is more. The EBITDA across the bottom is cost more. There right now, from those studies, and I don't remember, around 100 companies, we see a negative relationship between AI use and EBITDA. One, I think, and correct me, panel, if I'm wrong, someone said, I said, why might this happen? And someone said, maybe struggling firms are moving to AI more. I don't know. That was interesting. But when we looked at AI use and revenue growth as a percentage of revenue, there was a very positive trend line. AI use tended to connect more with growth. Maybe these companies are more innovative. Maybe it's helping them. My takeaway from this, we didn't see a positive relationship between AI use and higher EBITDA, but we did see a positive relationship between AI use and growth. What are the implications for the future? I think if there's growth coming, if this is helping growth, this will eventually help increase EBITDA as a percentage. Now, I use AI some, but I'm not a specialist, or I'm not an expert in AI. But I see a potential there, strategic. If we can use it to grow, maybe to identify prospects, eventually that may help affect the EBITDA. Any comments?
I think one of the challenges that we faced with using AI, we've looked at it for both estimating and then back-end analysis of those estimates and the actual job cost, is getting enough data in to get an accurate output.
Yeah. Just restate what you said.
So using AI to do some of the analytics, you have to have enough, you have to be feeding enough into it to get accurate results for your particular needs.
Looks like we have IT problems from Dr. Ralph's side, and he has been unexpectedly disconnected. So we'll wait just a moment for him to rejoin. There we go.
Hello.
There we go. Looks like we lost you there for a moment.
Well, we had a storms brewing in. Interesting. So anyway, that's the thoughts about AI. Any other thoughts about AI and growth, or AI and EBITDA?
A lot of buzz about it right now, and there are some things that help you to be more efficient. And there are others that I say, gosh, it seems like we're throwing a whole bunch in there and just getting a bunch of stuff out, but nobody's reviewing it to say, is it accurate? Is it valuable? Everybody just wants to use it. Looks like Dr. Ralph is locked up. So he may have storm technology issues on his end where he's at. Any other comments? Oh, are you back? Yeah, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Dr. Ralph. He's going to work on audio. Any other comments from our panelists or from our attendees while he's dealing with this connectivity?
The one concern we have, Teresa, is security. And we've talked about it with our data security. And because once you put it on the AI, it's out there. And so trying to come up with a policy of something that, you really don't know a lot about is difficult. So I guess we're treading lightly to start with. And we're going to address it, get into it, but we're taking it slow.
You hear me now, Teresa?
Yes.
Good. Says your internet connection is unstable. Welcome to Tennessee. There's a lot more in our reports. There was 4 reports from that survey. There's a lot more there. You can get those reports from your association. Thank you so much for your input. Thank you, panel, for your thoughts. It was great. I'll stop there. Teresa, you want to shut us down?
Certainly. Like Dr. Ralph said, those reports are available to all of you. There's a lot in those reports. So if you don't have them, certainly just reach out to your association and we'll get them to you. One last reminder that the wage and benefit survey is extremely important for our industry. It's the largest one in our industry. And so I encourage you to participate. And if you don't have information on details on it, please email your association leaders and they'll get that link to you right away. Super easy to fill out. And we'll be talking about that in one of these future FEC webinars. With that said, thank you for all who attended. I'm going to ask Ken Rain as one of our committee chair people if he has any other comments. Matt, Ryan, Carl.
Well, going out, Teresa, I do have a comment. So please, for all the people on this call, keep your eye out from your association for these surveys. They are very important. Back in the day, we did the PIA ratio study, and we use still some of those principles today. And what Dr. Ralph addresses is, current topics. and we need to address these, AI. And he's on the edge of the academia, and it is important to get that out, and he's willing to do that and coordinate it. So I recommend all those people that can participate, we need your input. It is important.
Thank you, Ken, so much for sharing that. Now I'll add, I made a mistake in our last survey. I talked to other printing company leaders, and I added so many topics. I will describe it at our next meeting, Teresa. Dr. Ralph screw up. Too many topics. The next survey is one topic, very short, very concise. That's the path going forward.
Excellent. Excellent. Matt, any comments?
I think it was well done, Dr. Ralph, and I appreciate the time and your input on these surveys, and look forward to hearing more in the future from you.
Thank you, Matt, for your great insights.
Excellent. Attendees, watch for an email with a link for you to be able to get the recording and a PDF of the slides, and we encourage your input, your participation, and your comments going forward. Thanks to everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Blessings.